Hey, Flames here. Today I'll be teaching you a thing or two about Paladin. I'm currently on the 8th place of the leaderboard with the 72.7% win rate, which is currently the highest win rate in top 10. First, we'll be talking about our identity skills. The identity skill on the left is called Warrior of Light, but I like to call it Sword Form. Sword Form is a term that I'll be using throughout the guide, so don't get confused. When I say Sword Form, I'm obviously talking about Warrior of Light. The identity skill on the right is called Blessed Aura. We don't care about it in PvP, you should never, ever use it in PvP, you should always be using Sword Form. Now, we'll be talking about Sword Form, aka Warrior of Light, and why it's such a good skill. So, if you look at the description, it is basically saying that it increases the range of your blue skills by a whopping 30%, and the damage of those blue skills by even more impressive 40%. Skill range in this game is incredibly massive, especially when you want to catch someone out of their field of view. They'll never see it coming. Some skills, such as Execution of Justice, also have a tripod that gives them a massive increase in damage while in Sword Form. So, when exactly do you want to use Sword Form? Well, you first need to make sure that your most important skills are off cooldown so that you have as much time as possible to use those skills. By most important skills, I'm talking about Execution of Justice, aka Wide Attack, and Holy Sword, aka Sword of Justice, which are these two skills right here. These two skills are your bread and butter while you're in your sword form, as they deal massive amounts of damage to the enemy. Wow, I almost forgot to tell you guys about this. I need to tell you guys about the identity gauge. So, the most important thing when it comes to gauge gain is to land a lot of hits on the enemy. Once your gauge is full, you can use one of your identity skills, preferably sword form, then the gauge will slowly start to tick down over time. It's also important to remember that it's impossible to gain gauge while in sword form. So let's talk about the stat distribution. As you can see, I have 1 point in critical, 83 points in subdue, also known as domination, 950 points in agility, also known as swiftness, and 216 points in endurance. Now let's talk about the stats and see why they're so important. I put 1 point into critical just in case the RNG gods decide to bless me with their luck once in my life. I put 83 points into domination to do extra damage to CC'd enemies. It doesn't matter whether you're the one CCing them or if it's one of your teammates, you still get a domination proc. I put 950 points into swiftness for the extra cooldown reduction, the extra attack speed increase, and the extra movement speed. I think movement speed is definitely a game changer in games like this. And I put 216 points into endurance for the vast amount of tankiness that it gives me, especially as a paladin that can abuse shields. Now, let's go over the skill build. I'll first mention the names of these skills in the Russian version, and then I'll mention the names of the skills in the Amazon version. So first of all, we have Shield of Fate, also known as Holy Protection. Then we have Dagger Lunge, also known as Charge. Then we have Wide Attack, also known as Execution of Justice. Then we have Rufeon's Word, also known as Godsent Law. Then we have Sword of Justice, also known as Holy Sword. Then we have Harsh Retribution, also known as Executor Sword. Then we have Hand of Heaven, also known as Wrath of God. Then we have Guardian Angel, also known as Heavenly Blessing. And for our last one, this is the Awakening Luteran Court. I'm not sure of the name of the skill in the Amazon version, but I know this is the best awakening you can ask for. Like, this might be the best awakening in the whole game. And once it gets buffed, it's gonna be next. I'll be showing you what each of the skills look like. The blue skills will have a sword form version of their skills included. Also, it's important to mention that you'll get stagger and knockup immunity while your identity skill is being activated. So, let's start. Okay, now that you guys have seen the skills, I think it's time to show you some tricks and combos. Okay, so here's a trick with Godsent Law. If you can use Charge right as Godsent Law does a stagger tick, then you can knock the enemy up without them being able to escape. So let's try it. Yeah, see, this was perfect. Okay, so here's another trick. This one is with the Execution of Justice, also known as Wide Attack. If all of your skills are on cooldown, then all you need to do is use Execution of Justice and just auto-attack until the enemy gets knocked up. Next, I'm about to show you a combo that does not work on all classes. The rest of the combos after this won't need any voiceovers, as they are pretty self-explanatory. Now, after those amazing combos are out of the way, I think it's time to talk about the skills. I will start off with Charge. Charge is one of the most important skills that Paladin has as far as PvP is concerned. The skill has a lot of stagger immunity, so you can use it to dash out of certain situations without worrying too much about being staggered. Just so you know, stagger immunity does not equal to knock-up immunity. It's a really low cooldown skill, and it's the only mobility skill in your build unless you go for Dash Slash, which I fully disagree with. You can use the skill whenever you want to go in, but also when you want to get out quickly. The skill is really fast and has a really big range, which increases even more while you're in your sword form. The only real issue with the skill is that it requires a lot of precise aiming, unless you're in your sword form, and then it doesn't require as much aiming. In some situations when I'm being comboed by the enemy and I get to stand up, the first skill I use is Charge, even before I press spacebar to dash. Now, you might be asking yourself, why do I do this? Well, it's because Charge skill doesn't only give you mobility, but it also gives you protection. When you cast the skill, you gain a 7.5% max HP shield around you for 3 seconds. You can use it to ignore a bunch of damage throughout the game if you can time it correctly. The skill also gets a knock-up when you invest like 10 points into it. The knock-up is really good for peeling as well as starting a combo on the enemy. Next, we'll be talking about Executor Sword. This skill is basically a 50-50 for some people. Some take this skill while others take Dash Slash. Here's my explanation as to why Executor Sword is better than Dash Slash. Executor Sword is pretty much instant and has a longer knock-up range, especially when in sword form. It basically allows you to space into instant knock-up, which is really hard to counter or predict, especially when you're out of field of view, while Dash Slash is slower and has 3 seconds more cooldown in PvP. Only good thing about Dash Slash is that it gives you stagger immunity, which isn't knock-up immunity, just stagger immunity, and some mobility so you can run away in some situations. But even then, I don't think Dash Slash is the play because it's so easy to predict and counter. This is why I prefer Executor Sword over Dash Slash. Let's talk about Execution of Justice. Execution of Justice might be your most important skill in regard to your own safety. It's a skill that you'll use whenever you feel as though you're endangered in any sort of way. It's also the only skill in your entire build that at 10 points gives you knock-up immunity. It's very important to remember that you can still get hard CC'd while you're in the skill animation, as it does nothing to prevent hard CCs such as stuns, freezes, or paralyzes. You generally want to use this skill whenever you're in a pickle. Let's say that 2 to 3 enemies surround you. What are you going to do? You have a few options. You can spacebar and charge to dash away, you can Godsent under yourself, or you can take the safest option and use Execution of Justice. It'll give you a 7.5% max HP shield for 4 seconds, as well as most likely save you from being knocked up. You should be safe as long as the enemy doesn't have any hard CCs that they can hit you with. You also want to use this skill whenever you think you're about to be jumped on by a single or more enemies. If you predict it correctly, chances are they're gonna get staggered in the skill, allowing you to connect it into a combo. Combo example would be Execution of Justice into Wrath of God into Holy Sword. You could also use this skill in a combo or simply try to catch someone by spacebarring into Execution of Justice. I think it's pretty safe to do that due to 7.5% max HP shield plus the super armor that the skill provides. It's also very important to remember that this skill does a lot of damage while you're in your sword form. Now, we move on to Wrath of God. Wrath of God is the only reliable hard CC skill that Paladin has. What does hard CC mean exactly? Hard CC is when you either use your skills to stun, paralyze, or freeze the enemy. It's a whole tier above knockup and a whole 2 tiers above stagger abilities. There are only a few things that can ignore hard CC skills. This skill is really important, especially when it comes to comboing. You can use it to confirm a combo with almost any of your skills. You could also use it right after Execution of Justice to hard CC an enemy into Holy Sword, which is going to give you an insane amount of damage, especially if Holy Sword crits. The main thing with the skill is positioning though. You need to learn the exact range of the skills because you need to be really precise on it. There's a lot of times where you can use this skill to peel the enemy off of your teammates, but only if you're using it from max range. Otherwise there's a good chance you're getting hit by the enemy while trying to use the skill to peel and help your teammates. You getting comboed along with your teammates doesn't help anyone, so make sure you study the skill until you're 100% confident in the range. I like to sometimes dash into the enemy backline and use Wrath of God when they least expect it. It's a really big gamble whether Wrath of God will go off before they manage to stop me, but if it lands, it'll be a huge win for both me and my teammates. So, let's talk about Godsent Law. Godsent Law is a really important skill that currently gives you a shield worth 10% of your max HP for 5 seconds as soon as you cast it. It currently doesn't matter whether you stand inside of Godsent Law's area range or not, as far as shielding yourself is concerned, but it'll matter once we get the latest Korean patch. The skill also gives you stagger immunity while casting it, and that's really important to take note of. The Korean changes make it so Godsent Law gives any person inside of it a 5% max HP shield for 5 seconds, whether it be you or your teammates. This in turn makes it so you lose 10% max HP shield that you would have gained on yourself, even while outside of Godsent Law's cast range. Also, another noteworthy thing to mention about Godsent Law is that anyone standing inside of it gets a 70% damage reduction as long as 1 second has passed since it was casted. Once we get the latest Korean patch, then anyone standing inside of it will instantly gain a 70% damage reduction as soon as the skill is casted. Now, when do you want to use Godsent Law? Well, there are 3 different scenarios where you'd want to use it, and those are poking your enemies, peeling for your teammates, and saving yourself. Most of the time, I make sure to use my Godsent Law as soon as it's off cooldown, whether it be to save myself, save my teammates, or poke my enemies. All 3 of those options are very viable, and all of them are good in their own way. Like for example, if you aim your Godsent Law at a faraway enemy, then there's a good chance you'll catch them in a stagger or make them dash out of it. If you do manage to catch them, then your teammates are most likely going to be able to connect your staggers into a combo, all while under the safety of your Godsent Law. Of course, it takes a bit of time to get used to the cast delay, but once you have it down, you'll be a real champion amongst the Paladins. Once we get the Paladin changes, you'll no longer be able to receive a shield while you're outside Godsent Law, so poking won't be as viable. When you're using Godsent Law to save yourself, you'll want to cast it under yourself only when you know that the enemy will jump on you and that there's nothing else you can do about it to escape. As for saving your teammates, you see artillery stunning your teammate in the distance, just throw a Godsent Law under him with the correct timing and the artillerist will hate your guts. There'll be a lot of times where your teammates are engaging against the enemies and you'll have the easiest time throwing your Godsent Law under them. Some classes are able to instantly jump on you as soon as you use your Godsent Law. My advice for you is to either dash away with space, use charge to get away, or use Execution of Justice to super armor the enemy and hope they don't hard CC you. You can also cancel the skill animation by just walking or using any skill. Let's talk about Holy Sword. Holy Sword is your bread and butter when it comes to dealing huge amounts of damage to the enemy. It's a skill that you would want to use whenever you're sure that it's going to hit. Holy Sword has 2 parts to it. The first part confirms that you've hit something, while the second part is the one that does the line AoE damage. You can use it in loads of different combos depending on what classes you're staggering / knocking up, as some classes have a faster falling animations than the others. Like for example, if you try to use charge into Holy Sword on a mage class, then you most likely won't be able to land the Holy Sword as the mage is going to stand up by the time the second Holy Sword charge hits the ground. If you try to do the same on a warrior class though, then it will definitely work due to the warrior classes having a very long fall animation. This skill is incredibly potent when you're in your sword form, and it does insane amounts of damage, upwards to 40,000 per person if all the stars align. The next skill we'll be talking about is Holy Protection. This skill is really strong and you can definitely use it to save your teammates from all kinds of situations. Holy Protection gives everyone on your team a shield for 16% of the Paladin's maximum HP for 4 seconds. Now, we'll be comparing Healing Shield versus Damage Shield. Healing Shield is on the third row on the right, also known as Wow of Light. Healing Shield extends the base shield cooldown by 8 seconds. This is counting the cooldown reduction you'd get from Swiftness. That means that the shield will have 48 seconds cooldown after each use. In Rush's 300-second matches, Healing Shield can realistically be used around 6 times. Those 6 Healing Shields can heal up to a total of 108,000 HP or more, depending on whether the person has spec endurance in their PvP stats or not. This is of course counting that all 3 people get all 6 shields when they need it, and that they get healed with those shields. The healing is based on Paladin's max HP, so it's always going to heal for 6046 HP without any endurance. Once we get the 240-second rule, then you'll be able to use Healing Shield 5 to 6 times depending on a system called Overtime. Overtime is a feature when both of the teams have the same amount of kills/deaths, and it extends the game for 30 seconds. If you're able to use Healing Shield for only 5 times, then it'll heal for around 90,000 HP. Now, let's talk about Damage Shield, which is on the third row on the left, also known as Thunderous Protection. Damage Shield has a base cooldown of 40 seconds. That means that you'll be able to get off 1 extra Damage Shield over Healing Shield throughout the game. With the current Russian 300-second time, you're realistically going to be able to use 7 Damage Shields, and after we get the 240-second Korean rule, then you'll be able to use 6 shields without overtime and 7 shields with overtime, which is 1 more than Healing Shield in both cases. When the Damage Shield expires, then they explode and deal 3 to 4k damage per person that they hit. If 3 people with the Damage Shield explode on you, you can take up to 9 to 12k damage. Or unrealistically, if all 3 people with the exploding shield hit all 3 enemies, you could hit up to a total of like 30k damage. Now, the main issue when it comes to Healing Shield, or Damage Shield, sorry, is that they get countered by bad coordination, range classes, damage reduction, or even other shields. You're almost never going to be in a perfect situation to do a lot of damage with them, while the Healing Shield can nearly always be useful. So in my opinion, Healing Shield is almost always better because it nearly always procs the 6k healing. Damage Shield gets 1 extra use over the Healing Shield, but how much damage are you truly going to mitigate with that 1 extra use, right? 20 to 30,000 at max, I'd say. So this is why I pick Healing Shield over Damage Shield. Healing Shield is just way safer, while Damage Shield is very risky to use, especially in rank. Also, don't use your shield the instant you see the enemy, make sure you wait until someone takes damage, and then shield right after. Let's move on to Heavenly Blessing. Heavenly Blessing is a really nice support skill. It can genuinely save the lives of your teammates multiple times throughout the game. When you press the skill, it gives your allies a damage reduction buff. All you've got to do is to make sure that they're within 24 meters of your current position. Also, if you take extra damage reduction in the tripods, then the skill will give you a total of 40% damage reduction for a whopping 7 seconds. If you're feeling a little bit more adventurous, then you can try using the skill in a combo, but you have to make sure that your teammates are close by you so they can receive the benefits of the damage reduction buff. The skill itself hits really hard, so if you can hit 2 to 3 enemies, then you'll be able to do 20 to 30k damage in total, which is pretty much really good. If you're curious what the combo for the skill would look like, then here's an example. Use Charge into Wrath of God, into Holy Sword, and to Heavenly Blessing. Of course, and I cannot stress this enough, don't save this skill for a combo. If your teammates are being attacked, then make sure that you use it for the benefit of your team. Do not boost your ego by doing more damage. It won't help anyone if you did 10,000 extra damage when your teammates took 100,000 damage and you could have mitigated 40% of that. And now for the last and Paladin's strongest skill, Luteran Court. I'm not sure what this skill is called in Amazon's version, so I'm just gonna keep calling it by the Russian version's name. Paladin has 2 separate awakening skills that you can pick from. Although the obvious answer is Luteran Court, you can only use your awakening skill once per PvP match, so you have to make it count. The way Luteran Court works is that you target the ground and the Paladin jumps, creating a massive explosion of light when he lands. Allies that are inside of the explosion gain a 40% max HP shield for 10 seconds, while the enemies take massive amounts of damage. Once we get the latest Korean version, then anyone within 24 meters of Paladin's landing zone will get a 40% max HP shield for 10 seconds. And now for a few finishing words. Playing Paladin isn't really hard, nor is it easy. The class requires a lot of map awareness. You need to know how to position yourself in a way where you can assist both of your teammates all the time. Healing for your teammates is also very important. Your job is to be a peel bot while also supporting your team to the best of your abilities. Paladin is able to carry in low elo games, but in high elo he relies on his team to do work while being the front line for the said team. As a paladin, you also need to learn how to abuse your shield skills. By shield skills, I mean the skills that give you an instant shield as soon as you use them. Those skills are Charge, Execution of Justice, and Godsent Law. The moment you feel threatened by an enemy, even if it's by a little bit, make sure that you use one of the shield skills. You can even use Heavenly Blessing if you feel that you're going to take a lot of damage and that there's nothing you can really do about it. Anyways, thanks for watching. I hope you learned something, and feel free to subscribe if you're interested in seeing more videos like these.